I'm Bill.
And we're Giant Slayer Consultants. And today, we're going to cover lesson number 17, the law of priorities, from John Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. These are foundational principles that if we can learn them, live them, and lead others to them, the quality of our lives and our teams, our organizations are just going to improve. And Bill's been with me several times as we've delivered this course, and each time we do it, we learn something new from it every time.
We do.
So hopefully today, we're going to add some value to you so you can begin to lead yourself better, so that you have more influence with those around you, and you can add value to other people's lives today. We're going to start out with, I usually start out with the foundational part of what we are trying to get across about growing our leadership. And John wrote a book called The 5 Levels of Leadership, and it's pretty simple, but it's profound. And when we think about leadership, law number 2 says that the law of influence means that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. We have position and title, but if that's all we have, we're not really growing. And that's where this first level starts out in the 5 levels of leadership. And the first one's position. That gives us title, gives us authority, and however we come across that is irrelevant. It's just that's positional leadership. Now, with positional leadership, people have to do what we tell them to do because we have that position of authority. But that doesn't mean we have a lot of influence with people. There's good leaders and there's bad leaders. And good leaders usually grow or always grow up this ladder of influence. And the second level is permission. If we become a good or a better leader, then people start to give us permission to lead them. They start to trust us. They start to call on our leadership ability to help guide them. But if we don't grow to at least this level, we're always going to find ourselves micromanaging, being frustrated on that position level because it doesn't seem like people want to do what we ask them to do or go where we want them to go. And I love John's quote when he says that if we think we're leading and we look behind us and no one's following, we're not really leading, we're just taking a walk. And I know I've been in that position before. I was in charge. I thought everybody should listen to me because I was in charge, but it doesn't work that way. They may listen to us at the moment, but they're not going to get behind us and support us, buy into the vision, and move forward. So we need to get to the permission level, and that means we need to gain the trust of our team, and that comes down to competence, our character, our care for the other people on the team. If they start to understand that we do really care, that we're competent, they'll begin to allow us to lead. The third level is production. Now we've moved up from the first 2 levels. Now we're starting to produce some pretty good results. And so we start to get some respect and admiration from those that we lead and those that we lead for those that are above us, and also from our peers. Now this is a great level to be at, but it's a dangerous level to get stuck at. If we start depending on our production to validate myself or my team, and then production goes down, or we hit a snag, and we haven't developed people, which is the 4th level, then we sometimes got to start all over. And sometimes we crash and burn because we haven't raised up other people and empowered them to lead as well. So we need to get to the 4th level. So while we're at production level, we need to prioritize our time, and that's what our lesson is today about priorities, and carve out time to pull people up beside of us and train them and empower them to lead too, so that our leadership base grows stronger, so that they can begin to develop other people and the team gets stronger. If you've been leading for more than 2 or 3 years and you can't walk away from your position for 30 days or even 3 months, and your team still carry on and get the same results or close to the same results, then you've got the people development problem. And we've got to stop there. Back up, carve out some time, and start to develop those folks, or you're always going to have to be there, and that frustration and that burden's going to be too heavy. You know, leadership is about building strong shoulders within your team and organization, so people start to share that load with you, and you're leading together. And then it becomes a team leadership culture. One person that has to step out or move to another direction, get a promotion, move off the team shouldn't have to suffer and start all over again. And if we don't focus on people development, that's exactly what happens. Many great organizations have come and gone because they had great leaders while they were there, but when they were gone, the team crumbled. So for sustainability, for your team and your organization, for your mission, we've got to get to level 4. Now the 5th level is the level of respect. He calls it the pinnacle level, or personhood. Now this person has led for a long time, or led for a good little while and has spent a lot of time on the fourth level of developing people. And this person has the admiration and respect of those that he or she has helped develop along the way. They respect that leader for what they have done for the team. Not necessarily about the accomplishments and the accolades, but about what this person has done to raise up other leaders and add value to their life and empower them. So that's the 5 levels of leadership. Ask yourself, if you're a leader right now, what level are you on? And you may say, I'm not a leader, but you do have influence, so you're leading someone. You're leading yourself, and you are influencing someone either in a good way or a positive way. So I challenge you, do you have a personal growth plan? Do you know what you want your company or your team or even your family to be able to accomplish in 5 years? So if we don't start prioritizing some time for training, then we can, just be bounced around like a pinball on a pinball machine. We don't want that, do we?
No.
So that's the 5 levels of leadership. I'm going to turn it over to Bill just for a minute. He's going to tell you a few of the laws we've talked about so far. We don't have time to cover them all, but we're on Law 17. But Bill, tell us about some of these key laws we've talked about.
Well, the first one is the law of the lid. You might ask yourself, why do I need to focus on leadership? It's production I need. Well, this law tells you why. It's because your leadership, your leadership serves as a lid to the development of your organization. If you don't develop your leadership, the organization's not going to develop any further than you have developed. And then number 2 is the law of influence, and it's kind of definitional. What is this leadership thing anyway? It's influence, nothing more, nothing less. And then we've gone through 14 other laws, wrapping up most recently with the law of the big Mo, and that's the law of momentum. Momentum is a leader's best friend, and it kind of magnifies results.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. He calls it the law of the big Mo. It's momentum,
Yeah.
and we called it your mojo. I kind of lost my mojo. Sometimes it's hard to get that mojo back. That momentum's hard to get started.
It is.
And it's easier to steer than it is to get started. So once you get it started, you can kind of start maneuvering, and it does make you look better than you really are at times because you got that momentum. But when you don't have it, you look worse than you really are. So you can be stuck and be a great leader, and you got to get that momentum going. Now, these laws and these principles we talk about, we use the word law, and sometimes that's a turn off to folks, but it's really a principle. It's a universal principle that works every time. It's just like gravity. Gravity is law. It's a law of the universe. As long as we're on this earth, we're going to be subject to that law. And so these laws right here, when we're talking about personal growth and leadership, they're principles, they're laws that kind of guide us. And we don't really break this law. We can violate the law. You can't break a law. The law stays in place. We can not apply it. It doesn't mean we're breaking it. It means we're violating it, and we're going to suffer the consequences. But if we use it to our advantage, we receive the benefits from it. So these laws, we break it down in 3 phases. First, we learn about it, become aware of it. Secondly, is we talk about living it out. And sometimes we've been living it out consciously or subconsciously. But once we learn about the effects and what it really does, then we can start to live it more effectively. And then when we start to live it more effectively, our influence will grow, and then we can lead others to it. Is that a pretty good description of how we do it? All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Bill. He's going to talk about learning the law of priorities. So take it away, Bill.
And a leader is someone who climbs the highest tree, surveys the jungle, and they look around and they say, wrong jungle. Well, law of priorities, we've got to make sure that we're cutting the right trees, that we're in the right jungle. And, because being busy, it doesn't even necessarily mean that we're being productive. We can stay busy doing work, but if it's not the work that we need to get done, then we're just going to be wasting our efforts.
I really like this quote, and let's explore that a little deeper. And when you think about this in life, we are busy in life. We go to work, we go to school, we get up in the morning, we deal with whatever activities we have. And sometimes we get on that path, and it's like cutting those trees out of the forest every day. I'm cutting down trees. And sometimes I don't know which direction I'm going in. And last night we had a great class in Seeing Beyond Failure. And we talked about if you don't know your true value, if you really don't know what your strengths are and recognize your weaknesses, it's hard to focus on those strengths and apply them toward what's meaningful in your life. And that's where a purpose comes in. if you don't know what your value is, you're never really going to discover your true purpose, and you can live your life to be 80 or 90 years old and come to the end of it and thinking, yeah, I missed something. So if you really know what your purpose is, then that helps you understand the destiny, and the vision gets more clear. So we have to prioritize, and sometimes just take a break and go and climb that tree and see if I'm headed in the right direction. Is this really where I want to go? Is this the job I want? Is this the career I want? Is this the spouse or the mate that I want to pick out for myself? We have to take time and survey the land and say, like you said, hey, it's over there, not over here. Let's change direction. So I really like that quote. That's a Stephen Covey quote,
Yeah.
by the way.
Well, and prioritizing requires leaders to continually think ahead, to know what's important, to know what's next, and see how everything relates to the overall vision. And it goes back to another Stephen Covey demonstration. You have a bucket, you can fill it up with some large rocks, and those large rocks are the big things you got to get done. Well, if you take that bucket and you fill it up with little things, then all of a sudden there's not room in there for those big rocks to fit in.
Yeah.
But those little rocks will fit in around the little ones. Those little rocks will fit in around the big ones. So we prioritize and get our big rocks done first.
Exactly.
And load them up first.
Yeah. Everything else fills in around it,
It
doesn't
fills in around it.
Yeah.
And prioritizing is hard work, and it causes us to do things that are uncomfortable, and sometimes they're painful. Because what prioritizing does is we set, these are things we're going to do, these are things we're not going to do. And most of the things fall in the category we're not going to do them. If they're not something that must be done, they're something that we can do or we can just not do. But it's going to require it. We refuse to do a lot more things than we do.
Yeah, that's key.
For one of the first things setting priorities is getting rid of things we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. And there's a whole lot of things that we can eliminate once we realize what we want. If we don't know what we want, I love what Yogi Berra said one time. He said, if you don't know where you're going, you just might get there.
Yeah.
Now think about that for a minute. If you don't know where you're going, you just might get there. That's pretty risky, isn't it?
It is.
It is risky to, we got this one life in this body, and we get to choose what we do with it. So sitting down and drawing out your priorities is one of the first things we need to do after we discover what we really want to do. And sometimes what we really want becomes more clear as we prioritize our life around what's important. For me, I'm still working on a book called Focus, and we're not sure about the title on it, but as I'm rewriting this book, it's really kind of interesting because I wrote it about 3 years ago, and it's been in the process for several years. But I remember going back and declaring my priorities. And everybody's priorities are different, but they need to be established because it's easy to say no to some things if you have a priority set. I can tell folks I can't do that because this is where my priorities are set. But if I don't have those priorities set, I may say yes to a lot of things because I'm just not sure if it's the right thing I should be doing or not doing. And then I can waste a lot of time. Exactly. And for me, my top 5 priorities is in this order. Is my faith. My faith in my relationship with God is number 1. Everything else flows out of that. Secondly is my family. Okay? If my relationship with God isn't the way I believe it should be, then it's going to affect my family life. My third one is my finances. I've got to have finances to support my family and support the work that I do in the kingdom. And fourthly are my friends. They come after finances, and some folks might have disagreed, and I've had kickback on that. But my family has to have finances to survive. So I need to work on my career, my finances, and those things to support those things. And my friends start to fill in those gaps. And then finally is fun. I call it the 5 F's. And I kind of like to weave fun in all of those 4. So ever since I've declared those priorities, my life has gained clarity. I know exactly what I want. Sometimes I kind of work through the day to clarify my priorities for the day, but I know what I want. And I have to continually streamline things away from those priorities to make sure I'm focused on those. So that's how they work for me. And hopefully you can sit down and declare your top 4 to 5 priorities and start clarifying your priorities within those. If your faith is the most important, what is the most important about your faith? And then you start organizing your time and energy around that. So, all right. Well, Bill, what else you got for learning?
That's how we learn the law, and then we have to live it.
All right. Now let's talk a little bit about living it. Okay. I'm not sure how many of you have ever heard about the Pareto principle, and it's called the 80-20 principle. And what the principle really says is you need to invest 80% of your time in the top 20% of your priorities for your biggest return. Now, if I have 10 priorities, 10 things I want to accomplish during the day, I need to pick out the top 2 or 3 and spend the 80% of my time on those top 2 or 3 to get the most return. If I give 10% of my time to each of those 10 priorities, I'm going to get a very low return in each one of those areas. So, and the principle is kind of funny, but it's truth. Now think about this. 20% of your employees are going to produce 80% of your results. Now think about it. And they may get it through other folks, but those folks are the ones who are going to get the things done. So if you've got 10 employees, 2 of them are probably going to produce the biggest return for you. So who do you spend your most time with?
Those 2.
You got to need to invest in those 2. Now 20% of your customers count for 80% of your sales. Now that sounds ridiculous, but I was in the retail world and I know that to be true. And we had loyalty cards that we could track that. Your top customers spent the most money with you. So who should you take care of or prioritize? Those customers. All right, 20% of your priorities require 80% of your time and resources and will give you the best ROI, which is your return on investment. Life is a business.
It is.
You got a business, your life is your business.
That's right.
My life is my business. We got to operate it like a business sometimes, don't we? We got to prioritize just like a business would to get the most return I want out of my life. So, all right, so determine your 3 R's. There are 3 R's that we need to think about. First off, what's required? When I think about me personally, if I'm leading a team, there's some things I shouldn't be doing on that team. I should be focusing on the things that other people can't do, and I should delegate the rest. That does 2 things. It releases me to focus on those top priorities to get more done in that area, whether it's vision casting, planning, those different things. It also gives me an opportunity to empower my team. As I delegate, I should never delegate to someone without empowering them. We talked about this before, didn't we, Bill, in the law of empowerment. If we delegate to someone without empowering that person, we're all going to cause frustration.
Might as well do it ourselves.
Might as well do it yourself. And that's what happens.
End up doing ourselves.
And that's what happens a lot of times with a lot of leaders. They end up doing it themselves. Well, I might as well just do it myself. Well, what that tells me is you haven't spent time empowering those that you're trying to delegate to. So, all right, the second thing is what gives the greatest return. Leaders should get out of their comfort zone, but stay in their strength zone. We should always be stretching and growing. But jumping over into another lane that I don't have the skills, qualities, or the passion for is going to drain my energy and my time. So I need to stay in my strength zone, whether if I'm a speaker, a teacher, whoever I am, I need to focus on those areas. And let someone else put the roof on the house, someone else to mow the lawns, and those kind of things right there, because I need to focus most of my energy on the areas that I'm the best at and delegate those other things. But I should be stretching. I should be learning new skills in my strength zone. All right, so organize and prioritize your best time around what you're passionate about. And that's key. If you don't have any passion, how long are you going to stick with something?
Passion is the fuel that drives the motor.
It is. And some folks are so loyal, they get loyal to something they're not passionate about, and their lives are miserable. And we don't want to live a life like that. No. We want to live a passionate, exciting life. All right, now Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can tell us a little bit about leading others to the law of priorities.
Okay, leading others to the law. First thing is, be an example, be a role model. State your priorities, determine your priorities if you haven't done that yet, and then get them written down, state them, know them, and then live by them. When you set your daily to-do list, measure it against those priorities.
Absolutely.
Are these the things that need to be done today? Then help others determine their life priorities and then their work priorities according to the vision and mission of the organization. And that's kind of like mentoring, helping them out, help other people see how important priorities are, not only to them, but to everyone around them.
Let me stop you just for a second, because this is really critical. We can't tell people how to set their priorities.
No, we can't.
But if they come to work with us on a team, we have to make sure that that vision and that mission is clear. And everybody who comes to work or comes together on a team, everybody has their own agenda. I don't care what it is, whether it's to come and learn and grow and expand and be promoted or to move to another area and do something else. But while we're keeping that vision and that mission clear, we have to remind people, what are your priorities here? And then we build those relationships with them, and we can help them clarify their personal life priorities to organize those around this priority. As long as we're together, that's what the
And,
priorities
and
are.
as long as those priorities will mesh, then there's going to be a lot of growth and a lot more potential for growth, both for the person and the organization.
Yeah.
And we need to study others that were successful and share their stories. Jack Welch, General Electric, is a fine example. When he took over with General Electric, he decided, if we can't be number one or two in a product, we'll get rid of that product and kind of cut down. And that's how they defined which areas that they would continue to work in. And John Wooden's another, always having a priority of what needed to be done. And I think he even scheduled his practices by the hour.
Yeah.
So that, things that needed to be done got done.
They said that he and his assistant would spend 2 hours a day just planning the practice before they got there so they could be efficient with everything. And John Wooden won 10 national championships.
He did.
And no one's ever done that. So, he understood the power of prioritizing, didn't he, and scheduling. And I like the story about Jack Welch, too. Now, Jack Welch was a hero in some realms, and he was the villain in some because he had to make some hard calls.
They did.
He made some hard calls about we're going to have to reduce this or sell this part of the company off to get this extra weight off of us so we can focus on these priorities. Well, he took that company farther than it had ever been. So what's that mean for us personally? If I'm going to have to prioritize what's really important, I've got to make some hard calls sometimes. And sometimes they're not going to be easy. And sometimes, depending on the opinion of others, is what causes us to not make those hard decisions. And I love what Abraham Maslow said. He said, seek to be independent of the opinion of others. So when you know what's right, and you focus your energy around what's right, and you prioritize around what's right, there are going to be some folks that are not going to be happy. Some of your friends, some of your coworkers, some of the folks that work for you. But you got to make the call for the future, what's best for the future, and that's what Jack Welch did. So now let's talk a little bit before we close about an action plan. We always like to give you a few steps that you can put into play right away because, we can talk about this till we're blue in the face. But until we put pen in hand and get it written down of what we want to do and then start acting on it immediately, we're likely to lose it. Bill, you talk about that a lot. I like the lessons you've taught about. It's not in the what is it? It's in the doing. What is the quote? You remember what it was?
When everything's said and done, more will be said than done.
Yeah, and that's true. So it's always in the doing. So after we leave you here today, I'm hoping that you've got something here that's helped bring some clarity to you, give you encouragement to make some priority clarifications and make some changes to improve your life. Because you know what? Leadership is influence. And there are people depending on you to influence them, to help them. So make those changes. So first thing is write out your life priorities. I shared with you mine. Those are my personal ones, and you may have something different, but they're yours. Right or wrong, they're yours. So you need to prioritize those and get them written down. Secondly is organize and priority and determine what your most productive and effective actions would be in each of the 1 or 2 areas. So if it's family, write down 1 or 2 activities that you can that are most important to you about your family, and then begin to organize your time around it. Is it calling your son or your daughter once a week or once a day, or what is it? If that's important, that activity needs to be scheduled and placed in there, or time and urgent things will take that over. And Stephen Covey talks about that too, about the urgent things and the important things. Some of the urgent things have to go off to the side. Pressure. People pressuring us to do things that are outside of our important activities we want to do. So it's got to be written down and acted on. And thirdly, just like I said, schedule them now. Just do it now.
Just getting those big rocks out of the way.
Get those big rocks right there in the bucket. And then everything else will kind of fill in around it. And so begin today doing those activities and follow up each week and make adjustments. My wife and I, we do a weekly schedule about what our meals will be and what we got going on in the evenings or on the weekends. And it's never perfect, but when we schedule it, we get most of it done.
It happens.
But if I don't schedule it, I don't get any of those things done, and it takes work. And it just goes back to what we talked about, Bill, when you said it was hard. This is not easy. It's not for the faint-hearted. But if you want a life, if you want to live like nobody else, then you got to do what nobody else is doing.
That's right.
That's so important to understand that. You can live a life like nobody else, but you got to do today what nobody else is doing. Yeah. So think about that. All right. Well, that's the law of priorities. Bill, you got anything else to add before we let him go?
No, I don't.
Well, I've enjoyed it today. This is one of my favorite lessons. It doesn't mean it's one of my best attributes. I still got to work on it. It is hard work, and human nature tries to help us get away from hard work. But next week, is the law of sacrifice. So tune in next week. This was supposed to be a live shot, but we're going to put it on later. But our plan is to be on Thursdays at noon, every Thursday, unless something comes up, from noon to about 12:30, and we'll discuss one of these laws and one of these principles. But thank you for tuning in. Send us your comments, your questions, your insight. When you do, it challenges me to learn and think, and I learn a lot when you give me your insight. What about you, Bill?
Yeah, I do.
All right. Well, thank you. Tune in next week. We appreciate you. Have a great week.